Storytime about how I stole my best friend's boyfriend and she ended up poisoning me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on my Instagram. I met my ex-best friend 10 years ago. We hit it off right away in school and were inseparable. But shortly into our friendship, I noticed how jealous and envious she was. She envied my life and everything that I had. I got lots of attention from boys and she didn't. Every time we would go out, I was the one constantly getting hit on. It actually made me feel so bad for her. I stopped dressing up whenever we would hang out, and I even stopped wearing makeup just to make her feel better. She asked me if I was doing that on purpose and I told her no. I told her I just wanted to feel more natural and that it had nothing to do with her. But this actually started working. That's when she started borrowing my clothes and my makeup. She didn't even know how to use makeup, so I would do it for her. Every single weekend that we would go out, she would look really amazing. I would do her makeup and her hair and dress her up before we went out. Usually I would go in jeans and a t-shirt and not do anything to my hair or my face. But like I said, I only did this when I would go out with her. Whenever I went out with other friends, I would always look my best. But it actually started to work. Instead of me getting hit on at the bars and clubs, she would get hit on. And this made her feel so much better. And it actually made me really happy too. She started going on a few dates, and she had really good guys interested in her. One of the guys was in financing, owned a house, and traveled a lot, and was good looking too. The other one owned his own business, was good looking, really tall, and wanted kids right away. He would basically tell her that he wanted to marry her. But instead of being interested in them, she wanted to date more guys. She became a serial dater. Before I knew it, every single weekend I would go to her house to help her get ready for her dates, which by the way would take me 2 to 3 hours to do her hair, makeup, and outfit. But like I said, I was happy to help her. On one occasion, I told her I couldn't come over to do her makeup and her hair because I had a date of my own. She told me I was ungrateful and hung up the phone on me. I was shocked by her behavior. While I was on my date, she called me 10 times. When I answered, she demanded to know where I was. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I stole my best friend's boyfriend and she ended up poisoning me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. After I see her 10 missed calls while I was on my date, I finally call her back. And when I answered, all she asked me was where I was. I told her I was on my date and that I couldn't talk. That's when she told me that she would just bring the makeup to where I was so that I could help her do her makeup for her date. I was so angry that I decided to defend myself. I told her she was being a brat and super ungrateful. Then I told her I was gonna hang up on her and not talk to her for the next few days. I decided to turn off my phone for the rest of the night. Finally, a few days later, I decided to call her. That's when she gives me a half-ass apology telling me she shouldn't have done that and that she was acting like a brat. That's when I told her I didn't want to do her makeup and hair every single weekend. She said she would learn how to do her own makeup if I could just teach her. So of course, I agreed. After that, things got way better between us. She actually ended up becoming girlfriend with one of the guys, the one that was the business owner. She insisted that we do a double date. So I ended up having a date come with me to dinner with them. We were having fun up until my best friend started getting really drunk. This is when she just started acting out. She started telling the guys about how much I would get hit on and about all the dates I've been on, about how many sexy time partners I had. I mean, this is girl code. You do not talk about exes or guys that your girlfriend is dating to her boyfriend or date. I was so angry with her. Her boyfriend looked at me, apologized, and said that he would take her home. So my date and I decided to stay at the restaurant and finish our dinner. Then I get a message from my best friend's boyfriend apologizing on her behalf. He asked me if he could call me on the phone and we talked for an hour. Part 2 is up. Part 3 of how I stole my best friend's boyfriend and she ended up poisoning me. Disclaimers are not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My BF's boyfriend called me. He apologized for my best friend's behavior while she was drunk. I told him that I would talk to her whenever she was sober. Before I knew it, he and I had been on the phone for a full hour. He was making me laugh so much and we were having such a great conversation. We finally got off the phone and I literally had butterflies in my stomach. And I started thinking about him differently. I mean, I knew that he was my best friend's boyfriend, but he was being so nice. And he was successful and funny and good looking. That's when I decided to cut my best friend off. I stopped answering her texts and phone calls. One day she showed up at my house asking me if I could help her get ready for another date. I told her that I didn't want to be her friend anymore and basically slammed the door in her face. She kept calling me to apologize and eventually I accepted. But her boyfriend and I didn't stop texting. I started to realize that I was falling for him, so I decided to tell him that I had feelings and that we shouldn't talk anymore. That's when he told me that he had feelings for me too. All this while, I would still hang out with my best friend every single weekend. She would bring me food and make us drinks while she was at my place. I started feeling different symptoms after a few weeks. I would get these really bad headaches and I just felt sick all the time. I decided to go to the doctor and they couldn't find anything. One day her boyfriend calls me and tells me that he really wants to see me. He comes over to my house and we kissed. He told me that he wanted to break up with her to be with me. I couldn't resist and I said yes. When we confronted her, she said that she had seen our messages already. She called me a bunch of names and told me that she had been poisoning me. First I didn't believe her, but then I went and got tested and it was true. I haven't spoken to her since and I don't know if I should tell the cops. Him and I are still together. What should I do?
After 16 years of being poor, I finally became rich. Hi, my name is Lindsay and I submitted this story. Growing up, I always had this strange obsession with money. I always wanted to figure out ways to make money, how to save money. I even wanted to learn investing, but my parents said it was too advanced for me at the time. Kids had always made fun of me saying I was adopted and poor. I had blonde hair and brown eyes. Meanwhile, my parents had brown hair and blue eyes. We didn't really have much funds. My mom and dad were both living paycheck to paycheck and tried their best to support me and them. And my dad was attending college for being a lawyer at the same time, so we had that debt as well. But around my 16th birthday, I got a letter in the mail. It was lettered to me and it said happy birthday. I started reading it and I was in absolute shock. The letter in fact confirmed that I was adopted, and it was my real mother messaging me. She said it was illegal for me to do this, so I kept it a secret. I never asked my parents if I was adopted, so I decided to do it today. I hid the letter under my pillow and went downstairs and asked them, was I adopted? And their faces were insane. Make sure to follow. I'm in love with him, but my Muslim parents don't approve, part 1. When I was around 5 years old, I met this boy, let's call him Henry. Henry was black, and he was in a really big family. Me and him were always at the hip, and we've been friends now for about 11 years. I'm now 15 in high school and he's 16. I've had this undeniable crush on him. All of my friends know, I know, he knows probably, his friends know, and he has a mutual crush on me. So he decided to ask me out, and I agreed. So around this time, prom came around, and I dressed up for prom, and my parents were so excited to see my date. So when they opened the door and he was my date, they looked so disappointed, and they looked mad. It made me and my boyfriend Henry actually pretty insecure, but we ignored it and went to the school dance and continued to enjoy ourselves. When I came home, I got the yell of my life. My mom said, Fatima, you cannot marry that boy. I asked her why, and you will not believe what she said. It was extremely racist. Come back for part 2. After 16 years of being poor, I finally became rich, part 2. So I asked both parents if I was adopted, and they gave me a disgusting look on my face. My mother said, Lindsay, stop asking such obnoxious, annoying questions and go back to your room. She was extremely snappy for I don't know what reason. She was never like this. So I decided to dig a little deeper. I actually wrote back to the person who was my so-called birth mother and asked her if she had any social media that I could contact her off of. About 3 days later, she wrote back giving me her phone number. And so I began texting her. I asked for a picture of her and I looked just like her. She had blonde hair and brown eyes just like me. She sent me a picture of my so-called father as well. He had brown eyes and blonde hair as well. I was in shock. I continued texting her and I wanted to meet up with her one day. But then she mentioned she had a daughter that went to the same school as me. And the only girl I could think of was one of the rich, popular, mean girls of the school. Her name was Regina. So one day I was staring at her in class. She gave me a dirty look and you would not believe what she said. Come back for part 3. After 16 years of being poor, I was finally rich. So one day I was staring at Regina in class and she said, "What are you looking at, loser?" A bunch of her friends behind her laughed. One of the guys had said this, "You guys actually look pretty similar, I'm not gonna lie. You both have the same nose and eyebrow shape, it's kinda creepy." She then said, "Shut up, no we don't. Don't you ever compare me to that loser ever again." And everyone just joked around with him and came after him, like in a joking way. I just gave her a dirty look and looked away. After that, I decided to stalk her Facebook a little bit. People typically post family photos there and stuff. And I looked for what her mom looked like, and I kid you not, she was standing next to my mom. And her mom was my mom as well. But how was I gonna break the news to her? How would she take it? Would she be accepting of finally having a sister, or would she sit here and call me crazy? Would it break off the communication me and my so-called birth mother have? I wasn't sure, but I decided to take a risk anyways. I went up to Regina and asked her if we could talk in private. But she said I could say whatever I needed to say in front of her friends. Come back for part. After 16 years of being poor, I was finally rich, part 5. I explained to Regina that I'm her sister in front of her friends, and she laughed. She said, "There's no way a loser like you could be my sister. You're insane. Get away from me." And they all just laughed and I walked away. So for the next week, I continued texting our mother, and she actually invited me over for dinner. She gave me the house address, and I went to her house, and she had a huge mansion. It was insane. She showed me a car and a college tuition fund, and she had all of that waiting for me for when I was older. And she said I could live with her. I went inside and saw Regina's face, and she was shocked. Now I live there. Regina eventually warmed up to me, but everything is fine now. I'm now enjoying being rich. Follow for more story time.
Am I the asshole for complimenting a cashier? My sister thinks I'm the asshole, but I'm confused on how I could be. I was buying a bagel on Thursday and noticed the cashier was rather pretty. She had tattoos, so she was probably at least 18, and she looked around 19 or 20. I completed my order and said, "You know you're gorgeous, right?" To my shock, she gave me a blank stare and looked kind of disgusted. I tried to make conversation with her as I own both and asked her if she's ever been on one. She said, "You're done with your order, right? I think we're done here." She didn't even say thank you and gave me a nasty look. I don't think my compliment was crude or nasty, and her reaction was shocking. My sister said it was weird to give that kind of compliment considering I'm 58, but I wasn't flirting with her.
So when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this teacher who would only let the students in her class use the restroom one time per semester. Well, one day I raised my hand and I was like, "Excuse me," I don't remember her name, "can I please use the restroom?" And she was like, "No, you can't, because you've already used the restroom in my class this semester." Well, excuse me, you can't dictate my bladder. So I'm like all frustrated, and I started secretly texting my mom because I wasn't allowed to use my phone in class. And I was like, "Mom, I'm sitting in class right now, my teacher won't let me use the restroom." And she was like, "I'll take care of it for you." And I was like, "Okay." So 5 minutes goes by, and all of a sudden my teacher's phone starts ringing, and she walks up to it and answers it, and she's like, "Hello?" Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then she walks up to me like so angry and she like slams the pass on my desk and she was like, since you have to go that bad. And I was like, yeah, I really do. Thanks. And I got up and left. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was just the principle of it. I just roamed the halls. My daughter Savannah is the CEO of faking illness to get out of school. So when she does not feel like being there, she will go to the nurse's office and complain to them that she is really not feeling good so that they call me and I have to go get her. Well, one day after this happens, I walk into the administrative office and everybody is really concerned because Savannah is sitting in a chair like so dramatically like, hi, Mom. And like when I saw her, I burst out laughing. I was like, oh my God, are you okay? And everybody looked at me like I was some really bad mom. Like, oh my God, why aren't you more concerned? But as we were walking out, she was walking really slow and actually didn't look good. So even I was a little concerned. I was like, oh my God, honey, are you okay? Until we got to the car when Savannah looks at me and goes, you know what, Mom, I feel better now. And I was like, Savannah, are you serious? And she's like, Mom, do you maybe want to go to Starbucks and have like a girls' day? And I was like, honey, what kind of question is that? You know I do.
This is why you should always lock your doors. A class was playing a game of Kahoot when they heard a voice on the intercom say, "This is not a drill, go into lockdown." The students huddled in the back of the classroom and then the power went off. Minutes later, the students heard the sound of a man screaming at the top of his lungs, running down the hallway. The lunatic man started banging on the lockers and his screams gradually got louder. He then started banging on the classroom window, yelling, "Open up." He eventually left, and 10 minutes later, a voice on the intercom said a mentally ill person had entered the school and attacked the lady at the front desk. The staff did a sweep of the school and still couldn't find him, so they locked the doors and resumed class. Later that night, one of the janitors went into the utility closet when this happened.
This is why you should never explore abandoned ships. In 2014, the US Navy decided to decommission one of its oldest ships, so it brought it into port to be broken down for scrap. Before workers were allowed to actually start breaking it down, the foreman had to go on board and take pictures of every room. So late one night, the foreman spends about an hour walking through this abandoned ship with a flashlight, taking about 100 pictures. When he was done, he emailed the pictures to his boss, who quickly wrote back, "Who's the guy with the axe?" The foreman had no idea what he was talking about, but he noticed the boss had attached one of the pictures that he had just sent him. When he opened it, he nearly fainted. There, in the bowels of the ship, poking his head around a corner, was a faceless man wielding an axe. The foreman had spent over an hour in this hallway and never heard or saw this guy. The Navy searched the ship and never found this guy. They also reviewed security footage of the only entrance, and he never entered or left the ship. This is why you should always trust your parents. In 1990, a father and his 15-year-old son worked together at a gas station in Florida. One night, the boy was sitting outside on a break when he saw a crazy-looking woman walking towards the store. They were in a high-crime area and it was very late, so the boy turns around to look through the glass at his dad to see what he should do. His dad took one look at the woman and just shook his head, no, do not help her. The woman walks up to the boy and says, "Hey, my car's broken down, can you give me a ride?" Before the boy can answer, his dad bursts outside and says, "You need to leave here immediately." Angrily, the woman turns and leaves, cussing them both out the whole way. 1 year later, the boy's in his room at home when his dad calls from the other room and says, "You gotta come in here and look at the TV." On the screen was the same woman from the gas station. Better known as Eileen Warnos, she was a serial killer who used to pick up her male victims at gas stations in Florida. She was later put to death. If someone offers you this, walk away. In 2016, a man was staying at his friend's cabin in the woods when he decided to go for an evening stroll. A little ways down the trail, he hears someone call out from behind his neighbor's house. He looks up and he sees this skinny guy pop out from behind the building who starts waving frantically at him to come over. Worried this guy could be in trouble, the man takes off running to assist. But when he gets close enough, the neighbor just offers him a fistful of Slim Jims and starts talking about how much he hates his wife. Sensing there was something wrong with this guy, he says no thank you to the Slim Jims and walks away. The next day, the man calls his friend who owned the cabin to ask him what the deal was with his weirdo neighbor. There was silence on the phone, and then his friend just says, "I don't have any neighbors." The police are called, and it turns out his neighbor was really some lunatic who had recently killed his wife and had been hiding out in the abandoned cabin next door. If you make it to the end, I'm sorry. In 2007, a woman was lying awake in her hotel bed when she started hearing a kid run up and down the hall laughing and making tons of noise. She considered going out and telling the kid to be quiet, but eventually just said whatever and fell asleep. The next morning she got up and asked her teenage daughter who was staying in the room next door if she had heard the kid, and she said yes, it was so annoying. That night, the woman is back in bed trying to sleep when once again she hears the kid in the hall. Now feeling pretty annoyed herself, she starts walking to the front door to get a better listen when the footsteps stop right in front of her door and she hears the kid playing with the do not disturb sign. She leans into the peephole to get a better look, but the kid's gone. So she steps into the hallway and looks down the hall, and there's the kid at the far end, just standing there perfectly still.
Storytime, I got my boyfriend back for cheating on me by getting him arrested. It was the summer before my sophomore year in high school, and my sister just got accepted to a college that was 25 minutes away from our house. So I would always hang out with her and her friends and go to parties with them. Well, there was this one guy in her friend group that I really liked, and he was 22. And he also had a girlfriend. But did that stop me? No, because he was really hot. And because we would hang out all the time, him and I were getting super close. We would FaceTime each other all the time. We would hang out even when we weren't with my sister and her friends. Well, the one night I'm sitting at home and I get a call from him. And he's like, my girlfriend and I broke up. I really need someone to talk to. And I'm like, aw, you can come over. I'll comfort you. So he comes over and I comfort him, and then we do the nasty. And the next morning I had to sneak him out my window because my parents would have flipped shit. So him and I start dating after that. And then Halloween weekend comes up. And I go to a party with my sister and our friend group, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I got my boyfriend arrested for cheating on me. So like I said, we got to the Halloween party and we met him there. And my sister had no idea that we were dating. Because I'm 16, he's 22, she would have flipped out. So a little bit into the party, I'm super drunk, we're dancing and everything. So he's really close with the girl who's throwing the party. So he asked her if we can use one of the bedrooms. And it sounded like he said, oh, can me and Millie use one of the bedrooms? You guys are going to find out who Millie is in a second. So we go up to the room and, we start doing the nasty. And next thing I know, some girl walks in screaming at him and breaks a beer bottle over his fucking head. She starts calling him a cheater and everything else. And I get a glimpse of her and it's one of the girls in our friend group named Millie. So I'm fucking shook right now. I'm laying down. He's on top of me. Blood's fucking dripping down my face. And finally she realizes it's me. So I hurry up. I get my clothes on. And Millie's just sitting there looking at me. So I go downstairs real quick, tell my sister I want to go home like for part 3. Part 3 of how I got my boyfriend arrested for cheating on me. So I get home and I text the girl whose party it was. And she had no idea what happened. So I was just like, oh, it's Millie blah blah blah's girlfriend. And she's like, yeah, but they're off and on all the time. He has a new girlfriend like every other week. So at that point, I block him on everything and I just go to sleep. Well, the next day I wake up and my sister and Millie are in my room. And I'm like, oh shit, here's a fucking intervention. But plot twist. My sister's like, Millie told me what happened with you last night. And I'm like, what? And she's like, how he took advantage of you. And I'm like, oh yeah, that. And my sister was like, it's okay, it's not your fault. Like, we need to go to the police. It isn't right what he did to you. And none of them had an idea that, like, we were dating the whole time. So my sister was like, you need to tell mom. So I told my mom, and then we got the police involved, and now he's in jail. Yes, I know what I did was fucked up. I know I lied. But I have no fucking remorse. Karma's a bitch. Storytime about how I got catfished and almost kidnapped. So because I just turned 18, I thought about signing up for a few dating apps. So I did. I matched with this really cute guy named Chris. And we chatted on the app for like 3 weeks back and forth. I would ask him to FaceTime, but he would always make up some lame excuse. Yes, ladies, there's a video dating app coming out soon. So no more lame excuses for sus boys. Anyways, so finally after asking him a bunch of times to hang out, we finally made plans to meet up for dinner. He gave me the address to the place and it was like 20 minutes from where I lived. And he told me that he was going to be wearing a baseball cap and I told him that I was going to be wearing a white shirt and green jeans. So I took an Uber and got there at like 6 o'clock. But when I got in there, I didn't see anybody with a baseball cap on. While I'm looking around, all of a sudden somebody taps me on the shoulder. So I turn around and it's this older guy wearing a baseball cap. And he goes, oh, hi, I'm Chris. So I'm definitely feeling super sus at this point. But I'm too fucking nice to be like, ooh, get the fuck away from me. So I figured I might as well get a free meal out of this. So we sat down to eat like for part 2. Okay, part 2 of how I got catfished and almost kidnapped.
So we get seated, we ordered our food, and I start talking to him. You know, I was just trying to be nice and finish my meal, but it was literally so creepy. The whole time he's like, wow, you're so beautiful. How are you still single? Yada, yada, yada. I honestly just wanted to eat and leave so bad. So here I am texting my friend that I just got fucking catfished. And while I was going in and out of my purse, I dropped my phone on the floor. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, why the hell is she telling us that part about the phone? Well, because I'm pretty sure that he put something in my drink. No, like he 100% put something in my fucking drink. So I hurry up and eat my food and drink my drink because I just wanted to get the hell out of there. And my drink tasted totally fine, like there was no bitterness or anything. So while he was getting the check, I went to the bathroom to call my friend. And as soon as I get into the bathroom, I start feeling so off. And no, it was not my anxiety from sus Chris. I also felt like I was gonna throw up. And my friend wasn't picking up at all. So I tried sharing my location with her, which I usually never do, like for part 3. Part 3 of how I got catfished and almost kidnapped. So like I said, I shared my location with her, but it took me forever because I had no control over my body whatsoever. And I was throwing up uncontrollably. So she immediately knew that something was wrong because I wouldn't just randomly share my location with her. So that's when I blacked out and I really only remember a few things that happened after that. Like I remember being out in the parking lot and him walking me to a car, which I thought was my Uber. So I remember waking up in the car and looking at the dashboard and it being 9 o'clock at night. So I start to wake up a little bit and I realize that I'm in somebody else's car and I can't find my phone anywhere. I'm pretty sure I blacked out again after that because the last thing I remember is a police officer standing over me and shining a flashlight in my face. So apparently there's security footage of him pulling off into a gas station and putting me in the trunk, and he was able to make it all the way to South Carolina from West Virginia. So my best friend shared my location with authorities. I want to spread awareness that things like this actually do happen. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth 1,000,000. So click the link in my bio for a safer option of online dating. Love you guys. Storytime, my boyfriend beat up his ex-girlfriend because she tried to kill me. So it was my sophomore year in high school and I had just gotten with this guy who was fresh out of a relationship. And let me tell you a little bit about his ex-girlfriend. So before him and I even started dating, him and his ex-girlfriend were together for like 2 years. And guys, this girl was fucking psychotic. Like, let me give you a quick example. Last year, I had a class with him and her, and the teachers assigned partners for this one project. Well, her boyfriend got paired up with this other girl. And anybody who would even talk to her boyfriend would get jumped by her and 8 of her friends. So his girlfriend starts being buddy-buddy with this girl. And his girlfriend goes, oh, do you want to come to the bathroom to hit my dab pen? So the girl says, yeah, thinking that she's being all nice and shit. So they both go to the bathroom and they're gone for like 25 minutes. So I asked to go to the bathroom because I want to see what's going on. So I walk into the auditorium bathroom and nobody's really around that bathroom. And this bitch is getting beat the fuck up. Like for part 2. Okay, part 2. Okay, so like I said, I walk in and this bitch is getting her shit rocked. Like there were like 5 girls in there beating the shit out of her. All of them just look at me, so I walk out and go back to the classroom. And the one girl went to the hospital and the other girl got suspended. So back to present day. So after school that day, I get a ride with him and his friends to his house. Well, as we're all driving to his house, we realize that his ex-girlfriend's car is right behind us. And it's literally her and all of her friends. And at this point, my boyfriend's really fed up with her shit. Because she keeps following me around school, texting me saying she's gonna kill me, saying he got her pregnant, always says that he's been cheating on me with her. So my boyfriend pulls over the car, and at this point, I think it's a trap. I'm like, oh shit, he's gonna let me get beat the fuck up. Well, he tells me to stay in the car. He gets out and walks over to her driver's door and tells her to get out of the car. So her and all her friends get out, and one of her friends starts punching him. While he's distracted with that, his ex runs over to the car, opens the door, and pulls out a fucking knife. Like for part 3. Okay, part 3. She fucking has a knife up to my neck, screaming at me. And I'm staying quiet as fuck because I do not want to get my throat slit by this bitch. So all I see is my boyfriend rip this bitch out of the car and start stomping her in the fucking ground. And whenever he went and ripped her out of the car, the knife like slashed my leg open, so there's fucking blood everywhere. And we're like at the beginning of his cul-de-sac, so all the fucking neighbors are outside watching him stomp this bitch into the ground. And then one of her friends comes around the other side of the car, grabs me by my hair, rips me out of the car, starts beating the shit out of me. So then one of his friends starts beating up that bitch too. So obviously the cops were called. My boyfriend went to jail. She also went to jail. And after that happened, my parents made me move schools. But after that, word got around that they were dating again. Good luck to the next bitch.
Yes, this really did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting, because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the 1970s, a young couple decided to go for a late-night hike in the woods. A couple minutes into their walk, and the man remembers thinking something's not right. He tells his girlfriend, but they just decide to ignore it and keep going, until he steps on something that felt really soft, like it was alive. Before he has a chance to see what he stepped on, they hear all this rustling in the bushes next to them, and they bolt. Years later, that couple turns on the TV, and a death row inmate who's about to be executed is being interviewed. And they ask him, "Was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed?" He responded, "Yes, one time. I was in the woods, and a couple walked through, and the man actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away. They didn't see me." That couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy.
This is a crazy story time of when I used to work at Tilly's, so buckle up. This middle-aged mom walks in the store, right? And she just starts walking around the men's section and literally just grabbing everything she sees. I mean, she's not even looking at the sizes. So we thought that was weird, so we went up and asked her if she needs any help, and of course she said no. Then she decides that she wants to try everything on. So I unlocked a room for her, and then I told her that she can only have 7 at a time, and she literally had a million things, and she just ran in, shut the door, and cut me off. So we started to get suspicious, so I started talking over my little headset thingy and telling the people around the store what's going on. We knocked on the door like 3 times, asking if she needed help or needed any other sizes, and of course she just said no again. Then she comes barging out and literally runs to the front door and just leaves. So I walk in to see, and there's literally a bloody tampon on the floor. 2 days later, she comes back to the store.
This is why you should never watch my videos before going to bed. In 1986, a young girl opens her closet to find a man wearing a dress and holding an axe. He grabs her and ties her up, and then walks around the house and does the same thing to the rest of her family. While the guy is ransacking their house, one of the kids breaks free, runs next door, and tells his neighbor. The neighbor calls the cops show up, the family's saved, but the guy is nowhere to be found. The family leaves the house and stays with relatives in hopes that they'll catch this guy before they have to go back. But after a few weeks, they haven't caught him, there aren't any leads, and they say, you know what, we'll go back to our house anyways. As the family's pulling back into their driveway, the father looks up at one of the windows and sees, for a split second, the head of the man with the dress in their bedroom. They call the police, who go in and find pennies glued to the ceiling and weird writing all over the house, but they can't find this crazy guy. Until one of the officers found a secret crawl space in the basement, where psychotic killer Danny LaPlante had been living for 2 months.
Crazy story time about how my mom kidnapped my sister. So my mom and dad split whenever I was really young. And at this time, they were always in and out of court battling for custody over my sister and I. Well, the one day my dad drives my mom downtown to the courthouse because she didn't have a ride. And before she gets out of the car, she's like, "Can I give the girls a hug?" And my dad was like, "Yeah, go ahead." Little background information. I was more of a daddy's girl. My sister was more of a mommy's girl, which is probably the reason why she took her. I was sitting by the window, my sister was sitting in the middle seat. So she gives me a hug. Next thing I know, my sister's seatbelt was unbuckled and my mom was running across the street with her in the middle of downtown. Didn't even look for cars. So my dad got out of the car, ran over, grabbed her, picked both of them up, and walked over to the sidewalk, and my mom was screaming bloody murder. So this guy called the cops, and my dad was trying to show them custody papers because he had full custody. But the cop knew my mom, so he let her take my sister. We got her back, but I didn't see this bitch for like 4 months. Story time about how I tried to get my boyfriend back for cheating on me, but I ended up with an STD instead. So a little background information. I was dating this guy for about 7 months whenever I was in high school. And I would always hang out with him, his guy friends, and their girlfriends. Well, the one night we were hanging out at my house and he kept checking my phone. And he said it was because he was waiting for his mom to text my phone. So then he had to go to the bathroom and he asked to take my phone with him. And I said no because that's weird as fuck.
So while he's in the bathroom, I get a text from a random number. And it's a bunch of videos that my boyfriend took of him doing the nasty with other girls. And there were like 15 videos, all different girls. So by this time, he's been in the bathroom for like 15 minutes. So I go to confront him while he's in the bathroom, like I do not care at this point. And he's gone. My bathroom window is wide open. My curtains are broken. So then I start to text all of his best friends. Like for part 2. Part 2. So it turns out the person who sent it to me was one of the girls in my friend group. So at that point, every single person in that friend group was dead to me and I needed to get every single one of them back. So like I said, I started texting all my ex's best friends and I asked every single one of them if they wanted to hook up. 4 of them said yes, the other 3 just blocked me. And the 4 who said yes all had girlfriends in our friend group. Well, the girls in my friend group had no idea, so they invited me to their party. And at that party, it was my mission to do the dirty with every single one of those guys. Well, there was this bathroom in the basement, which nobody knew about except the girl whose house it was. So one after the other, I did the dirty with every single one of them in that bathroom. And I made sure to snap a picture or take a video, so that way I could send it to my boyfriend. I know, I'm crazy, get over it. Well, in the morning, my ex's closest best friend came over. Well, I did the dirty with him too, because my ex hated him being around me, because he was known for screwing other people's girlfriends. Okay, there's gonna be a part 3. Part 3. So a week later, I started having some problems down there. So I had my mom take me to the doctors. Turns out I have a fucking STD. And nobody knew about it, at least not yet. Well, my boyfriend came over that same day asking if we could get back together. So I thought, what an even better way to get back at him. Give him what I have. Mind you, I was still hooking up with all 4 of his best friends. And then like 2 weeks later, my boyfriend started talking to me about how he was also having problems down there. And I was like, oh, maybe you should go to the doctors. So after he went to the doctors, he texts me and he goes, yeah, I have an STD. So then I sent him all the videos of his best friends and I said, yeah, I hope you enjoy living with that for the rest of your life. And I also gave it to all of his friends and then they spread it to their girlfriends. Payback's a bitch.
Yes, this really did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting, because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector.
Crazy ass story time about how my best friend's parents walked in on me sleeping with my best friend's brothers. And yes, I said brothers. So my freshman year, I became best friends with this girl. And she had 2 older, hot ass brothers. One was in college, and one was a senior. Well, it was Christmas break, and her older brother from college was home. And my parents let me go with them to Florida for Christmas break. They had a super nice beach house, and I was sharing a room with my best friend. And the boys were sharing a room. And our room was connected because there was a bathroom in the middle. Well, my best friend got super sick the first 3 days of the trip, so she didn't do anything with us. So I was hanging out with the boys all the time. Well, the one night we were on the deck and we started to play Truth or Dare. And one of them asked, would you sleep with us? And I said, yeah. So at around 3 a.m., I snuck into the room and things started to get real nasty. There are kids on the steps, so just use your imagination. And things started to get really loud and we woke their parents up, like for part 2. Part 2. So we thought that we woke their parents up and we heard someone walking up the stairs. So I ran into the bathroom, hid, and they asked if everything was okay. And I was just like, oh, I'm not feeling good. I think I caught whatever my best friend has. So they went back downstairs and we thought they went back to sleep. They were never asleep. So we decided to go onto the deck and finish the nastiness that we were doing. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, like we don't have to be that quiet now. Because their bedroom was in the front of the house and the porch was on the back of the house. And we were on the second floor, and below that there was another porch with like a fire pit and everything. And I could see below us. Well, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw somebody walk into the house. But stupid me, I just ignored it. Not even a minute later, I hear the sliding door open, and I hear, and we all turn around and everybody's standing there. So they sent me home and told my parents, but I didn't get grounded because low-key my mom knew I was a hoe. Crazy story time about how my sister and I found out that we were hooking up with the same guy. So I was a freshman, my sister was a sophomore, and there was this really cute guy in her grade that I liked. But I could never find a way to talk to him because we weren't in the same grade and had none of the same classes. And my sister and I were not close at all. Like, we didn't tell each other shit, we didn't really talk to each other or anything. So by that being said, we never told each other about the boys that we liked. We just didn't have that bond. Well, track season came around. So they called all the people down who wanted to do track, and I saw him walk past my classroom window, so I decided to go too. So I signed up for track, and him and I started to talk a little bit. We exchanged numbers, and he was popular, I wasn't, so he didn't want to be seen with me. So after attendance, we would go to this graveyard right by the track and hook up. Well, the next day we had a meet in our school. So him and I went to the graveyard, hooked up, and that's when it started getting crazy, like for part 2. Part 2. So on our way back from doing our thing, we had saw a group of kids that were behind this bush and they were chiefing. And we didn't think that they saw us because we were like, oh, they're just smoking, like whatever. So I go back to the meet, everything is good until the end of the meet. One of my best friends sends me this picture that I guess somebody posted on their story. And it was a picture of me and the kid hooking up. And next thing I know, my sister is blowing up my phone. And like I said, my sister and I didn't have a good bond, so I didn't give a shit what she had to say because I didn't know. So then I got home. And as soon as I walked into my room, my sister was literally waiting there for me. And she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, him and I are in a relationship. And I'm like, bitch, what the fuck? And she was like, well, it's on the down low, but we're in a relationship. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're a whore. So then she decides to drive both of us over to his house. So we all decided to just stay away from each other. But then they got back together. So I just figured that wasn't fair and I'm still hooking up with him while they're together.